Which, not to ruin it for you, but it's hysterical because and I love the message there because the guy makes soap, but he makes designer soap.
Spoiler alert! Come on.
Yeah. Well, a big part of
I've only had 25 years to watch it.
A big part of the soap process is fat, right?
Okay.
Human fat.
So they use human fat.
Clinics.
What?
Yes.
Yeah. And then how he says it.
See, I'm telling you, you got to watch this movie.
I might have to see this.
He takes the fat from these rich people, makes soap, and sells it back to them.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Sells their fat back to them.
That's
That's awesome. Yeah, it's
Call in the SWAT team to decompress the whole situation.
Really?
People throwing Molotov cocktails and stuff.
What the heck?
Jesus. I'm
Here in
not hear about
Wichita,
that.
Yeah.
People take it serious.
So-
Well, speaking of destruction,
Speaking of blowing it up.
if you had, because we've all seen Fight Club except for Aaron.
I have not.
You've
have
seen
not.
key scenes, though, right?
I know what it's about. I've
You
seen
know who
key
the
scenes.
characters
Capable of
are.
having an intelligent conversation about
Oh,
it?
well, I mean, you guys can. I'll be here for it.
All right.
If
Well,
you
the thing to
had,
take away is his name is Robert Paulson, okay?
Is
his
it?
name is Robert Paulson.
I know the Tyler Durden character.
No. His name is Robert Paulson.
What does that mean?
All right, we can't have an intelligent conversation. All right, context. Robert Paulson is a guy that
Robert Paulson has bitch tits.
he has bitch tits. Yep, Bob has
Bam.
bitch tits.
Yeah, Bob has bitch tits,
Yeah.
and that is the transitional moment
Oh,
in the movie.
Really?
And Bob is Meatloaf.
Yeah, Meatloaf, the character.
Meatloaf, like the guy.
artist,
Yeah,
yeah.
they're backing around to the
Yep.
rock. The same.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So
There's
he's
a rock
in it.
element in this movie.
He grew up from a Rocky Horror Picture Show. So
Okay. Okay.
speaking of, if you all had a Tyler Durden in your life, what do you think he would tell you to destroy? Because like in the movie, like he destroys all the IKEA equipment in the apartment, equipment, furniture, whatnot. So if you had a Tyler Durden and he was trying to tell you like you need to destroy this, what would it be?
It wouldn't be my stuff.
None of it?
It wouldn't be my own stuff.
Mm. Well, you practically live that life to
I
begin
live
with,
that
so I
life
mean, you
anyway.
might be a bad case study here.
What? The austerity?
Yeah, but not being
Non-materialistic?
Yeah, not worshiping false idols and materialistic things and all that stuff.
Well, I think, if Tyler Durden, are we talking about physical things in our life or
Like your IKEA
Symbolic.
furniture.
symbolic? Because I think
Be
of it-
symbolic because I would go with symbolic because in the movie the IKEA furniture and stuff is symbolic. So
there's
if
a
you
time
want
in my Marine Corps career where Tyler Durden stepped up and basically just torpedoed my military career because I was unconsciously unaware that the path I was on was not right for me.
mm-hmm.
But somewhere deep inside, that shadow part of my mind was like, "Yo, dude, this ain't for you, and you're not listening." So therefore,
it rebelled.
Yeah, it rebelled, And so 6 months later, when I'm looking at the aftermath of all of this stuff, I'm like, how could I, someone so smart, self-aware, intelligent, be so stupid?
Mm-hmm.
Were you aware of it while you're going? Did you have like moments of clarity while you're going through it, or was it like all of a sudden you were at the bottom of a cliff?
No, it was.
He starts off the
Yeah,
day.
I'm like looking up and I'm like, man, that hurt. I can't believe I fell that far. I'm still alive. No,
So-
yeah, I wasn't aware of it really.
Really?
But here's an interesting thing. So I was 2 months from getting commissioned, and most of the guys in my program had already gone to Quantico, Virginia, got their fitting done for their officers' dress blue uniforms. That usually takes like 4 months for them to make those uniforms again already.
Yeah.
2 months before getting commissioned, I hadn't even gone to get my shit sized.
So Tyler Durden knew.
So somewhere in my mind, torpedoed my
Symbology of
career.
your career.
Yeah.
Okay. I can see that. Aaron, what about you?
Yeah, Tyler Durden moment where just destruction of life.
Yeah, I mean, the character rejects conformity, rejects false idols. It's pure rebellion, anarchy. Think about that. I mean, he gives that whole speech like, we care too much. We buy things we don't need because we want people that we don't even like to like us or something like that. So what would be something in your life that you're like, yeah, Tyler Durden probably would tell me I need to burn that.
Yeah, it was. I don't know. It felt like kind of a survival thing for me, but it was like religion. a little bit for me. It was,
I can see
I was getting
Tyler doing that.
choked out by it. I was just going to church and I was just seeing things that didn't make sense. That were very similar to what you talked about one time when you talked about being a young kid and your mentor essentially, talking to you the way he did, demeaning you a little bit. I felt a little bit like that. I had things that were going on that just didn't make sense. I wanted to ask the questions, but you're not really always allowed to ask those questions. And so I just was like, okay, let's just burn it.
Burn it down.
Whatever's left at the end of it, I'll pick up the pieces. But I clearly can't ask the questions, so I can't be here in this space. So let's burn it. Whatever survives, survives, and we'll pick up the pieces from there. What you find out is, when you burn a field like that, more nutrients come up and it's actually healthier. And that's essentially what happened at the end of it. Was I found things that I could have never looked for in the past. So yeah, I burnt down religion.
It sounds like someone, sounds awfully familiar, like a program that we all know.
Yeah, weird.
Mm.
It's interesting, though. I have had that moment. You know what set it off? Cable television. I was sitting there. It was bill time. It was almost $200 cable bill. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking to myself, like, my kids only watch Disney. Mm-hmm. And I only watch, like, 2 channels. Why do I have all this?
Yeah.
And I went to try to, renegotiate. It was time for it to come up. And I'm like, well, didn't need that. I don't need this. I don't need this. And, I was tear it down, burn it down. I was like, no, I don't even need this. I'm going to get an alternative. So I was like, you guys don't want to charge me through the roof. And it was weird because at that point I had threatened to go to another provider. And they were like, well, we can cut that in half. Would that make you stay? Yeah. And I was like, well, why didn't you do that before?
Exactly.
Yeah, now it's on principle.
Yeah, I was dedicated to this one. I was like, no, we are done. And then from that moment, it just something kind of clicked in me where I was like, I wonder how far I can take this. And so I went on this. It took about 5 or 6 years to really just whittle down everything to its minimal component. Like, I don't need this. I don't need this. What do I need? What can I get by with? Whatever. Mm-hmm. And I just slowly started to whittle it all down to nothing.
My wife and I watched a documentary on consumerism just recently, and just the amount of trash that we're producing.
Yeah.
It's just untenable. As a globally, it's untenable. Yeah. And yet,
oddly, I had that same thought this morning.
Mm-hmm. Now, I haven't seen the movie, but correct me if I'm wrong, the movie is a commentary on consumerism, right?
I would feel it's a commentary on a lot of things.
Well, but consumerism is part of it.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. When you said that, it reminded me.
One of the underpinnings of it is like this, because we measure masculinity in our level of success, and success is then measured by how much shit you can amass.
Yeah.
How much money you can make.
Yeah.
Which, not to ruin it for you, but it's hysterical because and I love the message there because the guy makes soap. But he makes designer soap.
Spoiler alert! Come on.
Yeah. Well, a big part of
I've only had 25 years to watch it.
A big part of the soap process is fat, right?
Okay.
Human fat.
So
they use human fat.
Clinics.
What?
Yes.
Yeah. And then how he says it.
See, I'm telling you, got to watch this movie.
I might have to see this.
He takes the fat from these rich people, makes soap, and sells it back to them.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Sells their fat back to them.
That's gangster.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's gangster. That's very gangster.
All right. I got a quick question for you, though. Okay. How does the narrator, remember the main character,
doesn't have a name.
Edward Norton's character, how does his rejection of Tyler, remember in the clip, symbolize the dangers of extreme rebellion, and what does that teach us about personal growth?
So in the rejection, I know of like in the ending scene, right? Does he shoot himself in the mouth or something like that?
Basically.
Is that the rejection, or is there a rejection prior to that?
I would say that Tyler's existence is the narrator's rejection of
himself.
Yeah.
Okay. So
it's him trying to break the mold. He's been cast in this mold of this drone.
What society tells him.
Everything that society tells him to do. And so by creating Tyler, he rejects those things. And then Tyler, as a different part of his personality, steps forward to lead him out of this programming.
So
Yeah,
is
like
Tyler like the exact opposite of him? Is that what it
in
is?
every
Okay.
practically every way.
Yeah. So
Well, it doesn't
okay.
even he even says that in the movie at one point,
Yeah,
doesn't
does
he? He's
he?
like, I'm everything that you're not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah.
Or everything you want to be.
Yeah. I talk like you want to talk.
Nah,
talk
yeah,
like
yeah,
you want to talk, so he's like this, and that's the thing is like Tyler Durden becomes this. This is what makes this movie very ironic, because Tyler Durden becomes this this iconic representation of what masculinity should be. That's why this movie got this huge cult following by the college bros, because they were like, what would Tyler Durden do instead of what would WWJD,
Yeah.
WWTD do? You know,
What would Tyler Durden do?
You know, and that would be the question you'd ask yourself if you were in a morally complicated position.
Interesting.
You think about the creation of that, though, right? I mean, so it was the emptiness of society. Excuse me. The emptiness of society, the empty promise of consumerism, the shallow and pedantic elements of what he had built around his life, right? And realizing how empty and alone you end up being when you fill your life with empty and
Trivial.
things.
Yeah.
You know, there's no substance, and so to create substance, you create this thing, this other thing. There's a lot of where that primitive drives come from. You know, is some sort of void.
Yeah.
Right. So this void, in order to fill the void, and he couldn't do it with his ridiculous job and ridiculous meaningless stuff that he couldn't share with somebody he didn't have, and but things, just nothing.
Yeah, and there's a lack of purpose too.
Yeah. No purpose. Like what
Aside
was
from
he
going
wake
around
up every day and buy more
figuring
crap?
out but also with his job, he goes out and evaluates these horrific scenes, and then does this equation to figure out whether they're going to do a recall, and if the number is less than what it would, then they just leave this danger in place and let people continue to die.
Yep.
And that probably wore on his psyche as well.
Oh, for sure. Especially having to see, I don't know what you would call it, trauma scenes, traumatic scenes like that. There's one, I won't say it here, but he's just looking at it, and you can just tell like he got that 1,000-yard stare going on about it, and it's like, how long can you, as a person, like even people like in first responder careers, EMTs, police, firefighters, like how often can you see car crash after car crash, house burned down before finally just like.
And one of the challenges that I think a lot of those folks feel, and then also what we saw with the narrator, is this sense of helplessness. And so when let's go back to the adversity nexus. When we talk about, we get into this state of stagnation where we're going through the motions, we're doing these things, nothing is changing, but yet we are feeling this turmoil and angst within us, knowing that this isn't right.
Right.
And so therefore our unconscious mind manifests a character who will take action on our behalf, whether we like it or not.
So would you say then
that is the rebellion?
So you would say then that he was in stagnation,
Absolutely,
and then Tyler Durden is the adversity.
Oh, if you were to look at Fight Club in general, I mean, it is a decent manifestation of the adversity nexus.
Okay.
Right.
I would agree.
The desire, right? The desire to break. I mean, you think about it. So yeah, in stagnation, right? Well, you could take it back. Objectively had abundance, right? He had a good job, he had a nice apartment, he had nice things, right? And he was trying to protect all that, and he'd get more, accumulate more, but he was in an unbelievable rut of stagnation, right? But it was not fulfilling, right? So he was feeling unbelievable amounts of adversity, not really realizing.
I would challenge you and say that because of his stagnation, he created his own adversity, kind of like what I did.
Exactly.
He created Tyler.
Yeah.
Who blew up his apartment when it was actually him, right?
Right, but that desire to come out, that desire for something bigger, something better, created Tyler, right? So the leader who's going to pull him out, right? And so you just followed along. And then what did he experience? He experienced personal growth, strength, camaraderie, a community. He built all of these amazing things. There was not probably
nationwide
healthy.
network?
Yeah,
Yeah.
nationwide.
Yeah, because it became a movement, right? Because at first it wasn't. It was
Exactly.
Fight Club, and then he builds like this movement, right? I don't
Mhm.
remember what was it called. It was like Project Mayhem.
Yeah.
Project Mayhem.
See, I know a little bit, but yeah, and so it desire, but then it grows.
It grew,
Yeah.
tremendous amount of growth, not healthy growth.
Right.
None of it was healthy, but on that back end, that's exactly what happened. There was a transformational leader. He transformed the situation fundamentally from the floor up, and then of course there was abundance on that end, right? And it just
Okay, so going back to the adversity nexus, and we talked about this recently. You can introduce adversity. It can be a vision. I talked to you about like, hey, if you feel yourself in stagnation, you even say it.
Good
If you
leaders
feel
do.
yourself in stagnation, create a vision. Well, that's your adversity. So is that like a seed? So he creates Tyler Durden in the adversity, and the growth is what comes out of that. Or is
Tyler
it-
Durden came out of desire.
Out of desire?
right?
Okay.
So the adversity was realized.
Okay.
Sometimes we experience, here's the thing, sometimes we experience adversity, we don't realize we're in it because we are
Okay.
so ingrained in it.
Okay.
Or we're avoiding it.
And
Because
we're
we-
avoiding
because we
the
wanna be
realization.
safe.
Right. Right. And so it's like better to go along than get along. But
Okay.
things are going to get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Right. Well, that adversity, there's a point.
Mhm.
Some people call it rock bottom, whatever it is. But when it's just you can't do it anymore, that desire then, once desire outweighs adversity, the creation or the discovery of that transformational element will come to fruition. Violently in some cases,
Mhm.
peacefully in others. Sometimes we can invite it, sometimes it gets thrust upon us. That's the weird part of this. It just seems to happen one way or the other.
So in desire, the context of what's about to happen is birth in the seed right here, right? If it's a Tyler Durden, it's about to get wild. If
Right.
it's something positive, like, you know what, this was bad, I am going to do something great for my family. All that is what the seed that is planted there,
Right.
correct?
Right.
Or
So from a Jungian perspective, our soul is going to evolve whether we like it or not.
okay,
So we're in a constant state of progress and growth and evolution. Now we become stagnant, and if we remain unaware, then we can be in that stagnation phase for decades.
okay,
But we're also in a level of where we are also unhappy. We're doing self-destructive or we're not realizing our potential.
hmm
But those things, unconsciously, we will go ahead and break the cycle, whether we like it or not. That's what I did
At
at
some
the
point.
Citadel. That's what you did with your marriage.
Yep.
That's what you did in the garage.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay?
But there's a point here that has to be understood in the idea that your stagnation comparatively is also decline. Okay?
Okay.
Because the world changes constant and forever. Right?
hmm
It's just constant and forever. So your stagnation means that everything around you is changing and progressing and doing something different, which means that you're technically
Yeah, so it kind of goes down, and then you enter adversity at the low.
yeah.
You essentially start adversity low.
If
Right.
you remained in stagnation from this point on, eventually you would get left behind, right?
Yeah.
That's going to introduce naturally a state of adversity, right? If you're left behind, if change is constant forever, and you're stagnant, and everything is progressing and changing around you, eventually the adversity is going to be thrust upon you. Because
Okay.
think about it, even metaphorically, you are left alone in the desert.
Mhm.
Right? Because everything else has moved on.
But you would prefer to be left alone in the desert, though.
That actually would be nice. But,
Quit poking holes in his
thinking.
plot.
but you know, being
Metaphor, I
alone
get it,
without resources
Yeah.
and everything, that's a bad thing. And so when you think about it, even from an aging perspective,
Mhm.
right? A lot of these elderly types that are reluctant to engage in technology
Yeah.
and then eventually are forced to do it, they experience tremendous amounts of adversity trying to catch up just to even operate in society, right? So it can manifest itself in a variety of ways. And so that's why it is in our best interest to not stay in stagnation or decline. We have to proactively introduce and engage in change on our terms.
That brings up an interesting point, and I'm glad you talked about elderly people when you brought that up, the aging people. because I don't think a lot of people understand. Me when I deal with suicide intervention and crisis calls, intervention strategies and whatnot. Most people, when you talk about suicide, they have this picture of what the who is going to commit suicide, who's that person, and they have with veterans, it's going to be people that look like this, the bearded, 35 to 45-year-old guy, but it's not. It's not. In fact, most of your numbers, if you go on the CDC website, you do your own searches, you'll see 75 and above. This is where you start seeing the numbers just increase. And where does stagnation start? You just talked about it. The retirement culture, no longer grandkids are no longer around. Your own kids are no longer around. They're off living their own life. You look at the highest states that we have suicide in. It's like Wyoming, Alaska. Where's the isolation at? Where's the stagnation at? So the more stagnation you do, you start to decline and you find adversity. Well, when you're an older person, you don't have as many resources either, and there's not that many people who really want to help you. You're a burden, and you feel it.
Yeah.
And that's why those numbers skyrocket, because they're in stagnation as well.
It's a perfect storm, and they're stuck, right? And it's usually that stagnation is self-chosen, right? It is self-inflicted because they're like, well, this is what I'm used to. The idea that old dogs can't learn new tricks or whatever it is. And so that's what they're used to. That's what they're conditioned to. So they just stay in it, and everything progresses around them. And next thing you know, they're left behind. And it is absolutely unfortunate. It is sad, but we could talk about the steps, but it just does not provide the gravity of how dangerous and sad and terrible that part of the wheel truly is.
But it's birthed out of something that was a shock to me when I first went through your program. It's birthed out of safety.
Oh yeah, everybody wants to be safe.
And I just went to the gas station. Oh, this is a safe place. I understand it's a different context. That's not for, this. It's not cognitive stuff. That's for kids and stuff. But I get it. The safe place. We hear that everywhere. It's branded as this is the thing. This is to be desired.
It's a desired thing,
but it's not.
And and here's the thing, right? From a security standpoint, safety, security are an illusion. Safety does not exist. You could build yourself a secure home, stick yourself in the basement, and a meteor could come crash into your home.
You could slip in the shower and choke on the shower curtain.
Okay,
Final destination.
Yeah.
What
was the example that you used for me earlier? The letter where it says just a piece of paper. I can't remember what we're talking about, but like they can't come within a certain amount of feet. What is that?
The
protective order.
Protective order.
Yeah, that's like you look at that and it's like, okay, but what is that really? It's just a piece of paper because nothing is stopping
anything.
This person from crossing this invisible boundary.
Yeah.
It's an illusion.
So I would say and what's the lesson it says for us in terms of personal development? Number one is recognizing that there is this cycle that goes on, and all of us are in it some way, shape, at some point in the cycle, whether it's our aging cycle, because, I've just turned, 52 this year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. Crazy, huh? I look real good for 52. But I definitely feel that I am in this transitional moment where I'm going from the 35 to 40 range into this next phase. And I'm like, what's that mean for me? And what are these things? I'm aware of it.
Yeah.
So many people are clinging. You've got the 45, 49-year-old guy who's still walking around in skinny jeans, and he's trying. That's a horrible thought. But they're refusing to change and evolve, and there's a natural evolution thing. So I would say
Tommy Lees of the world.
Let it go, dude. So there's something to be said for recognizing these patterns of these cycles and being aware of it, so that you can literally kill the old version of yourself. Not literally, but symbolically.
Symbolically kill yourself.
Right.
Kill the version of yourself and move forward to the next phase.
Prevent the extreme rebellion that we all experienced at one point in our life.
The destructive rebellion.
The destructive rebellion. Yeah, exactly.
Well, you talked about the interesting life, right? The interesting things that I've done, right?
Yeah.
Kill off the old self, right? I can't be
every
that
time.
every time, and do it proactively, so it's on your terms, not somebody else's.
Yeah, we all had to do a similar thing when we entered into the corporate world. You had 21 years of the Marine Corps. I had 4. Were you 4?
4.
You were 4 as well. We had to kill pieces of that off. We can't walk into a room. The first time I knife handed somebody, It didn't go well. I got called into an office.
HR.
Yeah, I was like, I'm just telling them what needs to happen. I'm being direct. Like, you can't do that here. I can't tell you how many times in the first 3 or 4 years I was told you can't talk to them like they're Marines.
yeah.
Constantly. I was constantly being told that because I was like, we need to move this. Well, a knife hand to us is like, okay, let's move it. To somebody who has never been in that culture, that's a very
It's
aggressive.
threatening. Yeah.
It's very because you're lifting your hands to somebody. You don't real. I mean, I didn't think about it, but a lot of people are taught you don't raise your hands to people. And here I am, like, we need to move that. Well,
As just a statement, like there's nothing behind it.
yeah, I mean, I was loved the person I was talking to. Like, let's do this. Motivate, but they don't take it at that at all. So we had to kill that off. Symbolically, pieces of it. I killed the whole thing off. Some of y'all probably keeps them around, but
Mine was a slow death. So.
Yeah.
I was probably more aware of it because I knew I was getting bitter. Those last few years, I was ready to let
yeah,
it
what's
all
that
go.
like? Because we had Ford. Is there
Yeah, you did the
is there a
whole
fade?
thing.
Well, think about this. I had that career setback at my 9-year moment,
Okay.
and I served 21.
Yeah.
So 11 years before I finally got redemption and got promoted. And it was one of those things where I was just constantly aware of this old version of myself that was holding me back, and I couldn't shake it.
Was that common with people that were like in there that long, or was that unique to you?
I was very unique in that
Okay.
sense because most people wouldn't stick around that long.
Okay.
I was
Well, yeah, that's right. Because
Would have either got out or drummed out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I sit here today wondering why I was so persistent. I think it was because okay, well,
you're hard headed.
stubborn.
I mean, you have drive. That's a nice drive. You have drive.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would
so-
have been funny if he'd have said drive.
Wait,
No,
why?
but no, I think it was one of those things. I knew that 21 years. I enjoyed the lifestyle. I enjoyed the job. The culture. So I was like, why not? My family enjoyed it. We were
Mhm.
moving every 3 years. My kids were growing up in this culture that they enjoyed. I just had to suck it up and recognize that I wasn't going to get the pay raises I was expecting.
Made a career choice. Like,
Yeah.
what would you do? Like, get out and start at the bottom someplace else when you were already
Mm-hmm.
E7 at that point?
E6.
E6, yeah. So,
So I could stick around, and we as a family talked about it. I mean, so it was a collective decision.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was but when you talk about killing off the old version,
Yeah.
I was ready for that dude to be gone. So
So
I was already thinking about other things.
You'd been poisoning him for a
Yeah.
while.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was looking forward to calling people by their first name and stuff like that. Everyone's like, Gunny, did you just call me Bob? I'm like, well, Mr. What do you might call me, Lance Corporal Paulson?
Was yours quick? Was yours quick, or because you went from the party lifestyle? Was it just like in one day you were like, I got to stop this?
Different renditions. Some of them were harder than others, right? So I was an athlete,
Mhm.
and that was hard to kill off because, growing up, I wanted to play ball for my dad, and then as I became a decent athlete,
Mhm.
and kept going, and the last words that my birth father ever told me was, "I'll see you in the Super Bowl."
So do we have to go to a Super Bowl now?
Yeah. No. But, that was an amazing driver,
Yeah.
and my family knew about my love of sports, and, it was an interesting driver,
Mhm.
right? And
Was it realistic?
statistically speaking, probably not. However, the way that I played, there was a chance. And I got to play with a lot of people and got the better hand of some of the people who were in the pros.
so the talent and ability was there.
Potentially,
Yeah,
yeah.
the potential.
The work
Potentially.
ethic and potential was there.
Yeah.
Did
And
you
I
have some
played.
injuries?
Huh?
Didn't you have some injuries?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was plagued with chronic sinus infections that they were feeding me antibiotics that were destroying my tendons. And we didn't know that at the time. And so I was getting all these really weird injuries, like a winging scapula and a snapping hip and just weird stuff. Somebody my age shouldn't have been getting, but we didn't know it was the antibiotics doing it. And so my body was deteriorating every time I was going and getting these antibiotics. And then eventually, just weird stuff, would happen.
Was that one of the points? Because you would later go on to do a lot of health science.
Yeah.
Was that one of the
That
reasons?
was a very big part of it.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Made you evolve.
even Absolutely. It was a huge motivator, just plagued by these weird conditions. Absolutely was a big driver to try and figure it out. And I did. I figured out quite a few of them. Was able to cure my sinus infections. Haven't had one since. But, just the weird things where, the seeds that plant, right? But it was hard. It was hard to stop being an athlete. What do I do now? All right, I guess, I like music. I guess I'll do that. Dove into that. And, but then getting too old and even, knowing, I mean, it would have been, here's the thing, it probably would have been easier to go do something in sports than it would have been in music. And
Yeah, it could have been a trainer, all sorts of stuff you
something,
could do.
tons,
Yeah.
right? And so, but every rendition, it's like, well, all right, I'm decent at that. It's even when I went to college, and my first undergraduate was in security management because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was an athlete. That was what.
Yeah.
Well, what am I good at? Well, I don't know. I did
Good at
security
tackling
a few
people.
times. I guess I'll do security management. I had a security mindset, so I did some cool stuff there, but I wasn't inspired by it.
Yeah.
And then eventually took just these 1 or 2 classes where I was like, oh, this is it. This is it. And, started to really chase the nerdy side of me. But yeah, for every rendition, you have to kill off that old version. What does it mean to be me moving forward? And don't regret any of it. It is a very interesting story. It's fun memories, ones I can remember. But yeah, I mean, it's not easy, but it's sort of like the idea to move forward, you have to leave something behind.
Right. So would you say that adversity for all of us, we all have a story similar to that, but adversity forces all of us to evolve. Like, I know I said that earlier, but I mean, we can't get to the next level of who we are without some form of crisis.
How do you desire something greater unless you can appreciate the adversity of where you're at? Like the detriment, I mean, on any level. Like, how do you know, like, I want to progress into something better unless you understand the faults and the flaws of where you're currently at?
And that's truly the insidious nature of safety, because when we feel safe, we're like, I don't want anything to change. I want it to stay like this forever. You don't realize that you're getting older. Society is evolving for good or bad. There's like all of these changes happening around you, but if you're the one that's stagnant, you're going to get left behind.
And that's the scary part, because what he just said, you'll notice that's a decision. I want this to stay the same forever. That's internal.
Yeah.
Like, I want to protect this lifestyle that I'm in. I want to protect this home that I've bought. I want to protect the car, whatever it is. And in doing so, right, rubbing your fancy car with your diaper, not realizing that mindset is actually setting you up for a horrible failure and heartache down the road.
Why Tyler blew up the apartment and all the IKEA stuff in there, because he knew that was coming.
And one important aspect of that apartment is that coffee table, the yin and the yang, the dark and the light,
I did see that,
which is with this foreshadowing for the bigger message in the movie.
Right. So so there's a theme here. Crisis is always, or adversity has made all of us evolve to a different version of ourselves, a better version than the last.
Broken window theory for people.
So what are some tips that we can give people? Like, how did we handle those moments of crisis, and how do we reflect on it and think, okay, like, that's it, like, had I known this, probably would have made that transition a little easier. Or should it just remain that way? Like, it's always going to suck. Suck it up, kid. Like,
I think I would say let go, move on. It's a part of, there's this process where if we're going to evolve, we have to let go. We have to let go and move on. And sometimes letting go is letting go of a relationship or a job or an identity. More important, I would say that the big part of what we're talking about here is we define ourselves by external things. We borrow confidence from specifically Marines are notorious for it.
Yeah.
One of the big eye-opening moments I had with Dave was like, why do you need to borrow confidence? And we do this because we are attached to these identities we have. The narrator's identity, he had to create a new identity in order to evolve. If we can let go and move on, we give ourselves permission to be something different.
Right.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, you have to address the past, right? You have to address it. You have to face it. Determine what you can learn from it, right? But more importantly, you have to decide who or what you're going to be in this next rendition. And I think that's the part that a lot of people forget.
Such a challenge for so many.
Mhm.
Yeah, but you get to decide, right? You get to decide, okay, well, like, so for example, when I fully embraced my nerdiness, I had to address the past. The idea of what I wanted to be when I grew up was found in the past as a little boy, and I was like, what did that little boy version of me want to be? Oh yeah, that nerd type, right? The
Mhm.
philosophizer,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
I want to
'cause
be a philosophizer. Neat.
Is that the study of fossils?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I wanted to be a philosopher. I was really intrigued by ancient philosophers and just the ability to sit around and think and create and generate stuff. And I thought that was really cool. I had to find them in the past, right? I had to remember and pull that out and say, okay, well, you know what? Why can't I? Right? That's the one that makes the most sense. That's the one I can be passionate about. That's the one I can do at any time
Yeah.
without some sort of gatekeeper. I can absolutely do this. Right? So you got to decide who you want to be and then chase it. It's not instant gratification.
Yeah, I think the other thing is listening to yourself. Go again, not borrowing confidence from what other people's expectations of you. I had that. I remember sitting in the barracks, my first enlistment, talking to my buddy Randberg, and sitting there, and he's like, "What are you going to do?" I was like, "I think I want to be a psychologist," but I didn't. I didn't pursue it then. I wasted a bunch of time before I realized that that's what I really want to do. Is help counsel people. Because I think even back then, it would have been 93. That's a long, shoot, many years I wasted. I won't say wasted, but I did not listen to that thing I knew what I wanted to be, but I wasn't listening to
Didn't take full advantage of.
I
Yeah.
didn't recognize what my true self was saying.
Yeah.
It's the neglect of the wouldn't it be cool if moments.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are powerful. If you've got an idea, I've told you guys before, if you have a wouldn't it be cool moment, you write that down and dwell on it because it probably is going to be a pretty cool moment. Could be
Yeah.
a cool thing. Could be a cool product.
Every
could be something like this.
every
Yeah.
person that we idolized, growing up,
Or read about.
me, like rock stars, right? Guys on stage, like they were, gods, right? Well, they were no different than any one of us. They were just the ones that didn't stop at what if.
That's right.
I mean, they did it for better or worse. More often than not, it's worse, but they at least did it, and that's a lot better than, I think, living with the regret of what if.
And I've said this a million different ways, but generally speaking, you got to remember that amazing things don't happen by those who dare to dream. Amazing things happen by those who dare to try. And what do you have to lose?
Fortune favors the bold.
That's right.
So what part of, I guess to tie it with you real quick, Lance, because I want to talk about explosions and self-destruction real quick, and you and I have a very similar background story. But for me, with my marriage, when I felt like a destruction, it very much was almost like you could say that there was a Tyler. I mean, I call it an entity, and I know that that's a psychological term, I guess. But for me, it was like that was 100%. It was not me. I was on autopilot, and it was like an out of body experience for everything. I knew that I'm a better person than this. I knew I was capable of being a good person. In fact, I would go around and tell people I'm a good person. I would hold people to unrealistic standards that I was trying to hold myself to, while behind the scenes being as toxic as possible. I made my ex-wife feel like she was crazy. I cheated on her. I did all these things to make myself feel better and put other people down. So what can we do to help people, I guess, and I'm calling on you, that because when you're in that moment and you don't feel like you have control, is there an eject button?
Well, I think there's a theory in a psychological theory known as internal family systems therapy,
Mm-hmm.
where we've got this self, which is our core self. It is the perfect version of us, and we don't have to do anything to it. It is infallible because it is us. But so much we are so distanced from that because of all these other expectations, and what manifests are these outer characters in our psyche: firefighters, the exiles, and the managers. And the firefighter is the thing that steps in to say, to, like, when you feel insecure and you start projecting that stuff on somebody else, the firefighter's stepping in. When I'm feeling low and that sense of self-loathing, that's the exile in me that's pushing myself away from everybody else. And then the ego part of ourselves that thinks we're perfect, that's the manager. And these are roles that we play unconsciously. The best thing we can do is start becoming self-aware. Start recognizing the fact that the true self is caring, confident. There's all these C's. I don't remember them all right now. We can look them up. But there's these 5 or 8 C's, whatever they are. And when we start feeling out of sorts, think about it. I'm out of sort. I'm feeling like I'm in one of these other character roles. Kind of like the narrator who created these roles.
That's going to be my next question.
Yeah.
So
okay, I won't steal the thunder. But that point is, like, we need to be self-aware and recognize that if we can identify those traits of the self that we can lean on, that's the first thing we can do, is give ourselves permission to just be us.
I like that. Give yourself permission, because that's what I had to do eventually.
I had to remind myself that I am the template that my daughters will use to pick their mate.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, do I want my daughters marrying a philandering, insecure, boisterous douchebag? You know,
that still hits hard. Like, I'm trying to fight back tears right now.
You shouldn't fight back tears, man, because it's important. You have 2 beautiful girls, and they need to marry an awesome dude like you are right now.
But I'm gonna have to explain to them that someday, and that's going to be a hard conversation.
Nope, you just need to model yourself today.
Well, I know, but
they'll grow into
the conversation will be someday, and I'm fully aware if it happens. So I'm not sitting here like making every single life choice like as if I'm gonna, what is it term, like a self-fulfilling prophecy type thing. But I'm prepared that they're gonna ask me someday, Dad, why aren't you and Mom together? And I'm gonna have to look at my daughters who,
you bet,
they made me the better man that I am now.
Yeah,
because I held myself to like a real standard.
You bet.
Because of them, and I'm gonna have to look at them and say, Dad failed your mother. Dad failed you.
You did the best that you could with what you had at that time.
True.
I will accept it.
Okay.
But I've forgiven myself, but it's still like one of those things like we talked about last time. Remember, like there's not regret, but there's definitely things like, if I could go back and smack myself upside the head about,
because today I know better.
Well, hold on a sec, right? Go back and change it. I would disagree with. I would push back on that, because you would not be the person you are today without that adversity.
Yeah.
That adversity is what created the desire to change, right? It was affixed to your growth. Your growth does not happen without that.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing is, your daughters, the dad you are today is because of that. Therefore, they are benefiting and celebrating this awesome life you're creating for them because of the hardship that you went through. Here's the big lesson I had to learn from him. I grew up with a dad who went to prison when I was 2, and I carried around that dude's sins for 40 some odd years. And it wasn't until this guy says, like, would you want your daughters to be carrying around guilt for something you did? So don't put your guilt on them.
That's good. I'm trying to fight it right now.
Well, it's an opportunity too, because they're going to face adversity, and you get to teach them these lessons their whole life. Would you want them to learn adversity on their own, or would you already have a built-in lesson? Look what Dad had, and look how he came through adversity. I've already got a baked-in lesson of how I'm going to come through it, because they're going to have it. And then now they have a template for how they're going to get through adversity, because you taught them that.
Well, you're going to be able to show them that it's not, don't hold on to it your whole life as a bad thing. Learn from it. Address it, let it go, move forward, be better, right? And that's what you did.
Yeah,
that's what you did. While it sucks, but it was necessary. It was 100% necessary to become the person you are today. And Lance is absolutely correct in the idea that your daughters will directly benefit from your growth. And that right there should help you appreciate the adversity, not reject it,
Mhm.
not belittle it, but embrace it.
One of the important distinction here too is like, you didn't learn who you were until you went through that. Therefore, and think about this too, is like your daughters, my daughters, they are, we cannot provide safety for them. They have to experience their own levels of adversity. And so just because we learn this great lesson and we're going to tell them, we're going to lecture and share this insight with them, doesn't mean they're going to use it. It might help inform them, but the reality is they are going to make their own choices, and some of them are going to be good and some of them are going to be bad, and well, life is constantly changing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we are all, our level of maturity is growing, but we can't expect people with a lower level of maturity to behave like they've got this level of maturity, right? So we have to have grace for the youth.
Yeah.
And that includes
Forgiveness.
Grace for our younger selves.
Yeah. And on that point, I mean, you think about it, there's a reason why helicopter parenting and overprotective parenting is so detrimental, right?
They want to be
Safety.
Yes, it is. Man, I can't.
And that's what I mean. Like, so, I mean, we can pull it out. You cannot reject or deny or even be ashamed of what you went through there. You cannot do it. You have to embrace it and own it and weaponize it.
I do now, but as you can see, I still.
Yeah,
It's
guilt
a
and shame suck.
It is.
Yeah.
And, it's a healthy pain.
okay.
If I
I'll
could
take
put it,
that.
if I could put a term on it, it is
I like that term.
absolutely. It's absolutely something that I acknowledge, gave grace to, accepted, moved on from.
Apologized for.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I through therapy, I had a list of people that I went face to face to because I destroyed a lot of lives by what my actions.
Yeah.
And I went to every single one of them except for two, because it was actually the better choice.
Yeah,
not
leave
to.
it alone.
Okay.
But I did go face to face to a lot of people, and
Well, you can throw it out into the world right
apologize,
now.
yeah.
You can apologize to the two
Yeah.
right now.
yeah, if they are watching, I doubt they are. If they are watching, I hope you, and if you're watching, listening, I do apologize for everything that I did, and just know that I still love you. Know that everything that I do right now is to make sure that you stay happy, I'm happy, life is where it is. I don't need to come chase you down. You don't need to come chase me down.
Yeah.
Love it. Throw it out into the universe, man.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
Just let it go too.
Yeah. In regards to Fight Club, which archetype of the models that you said earlier, the firefighter, the manager, and the exile, would you say represents Tyler Durden?
Well, I think you got to remember that first and foremost, the narrator is the self, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he is also not acting as the true self. Tyler emerges as a manager for him. His ego lets him know everything's going fine. Hey, come hang out with me, we'll make it all right. But then he's also the exile too, because they move away to that abandoned house and they don't talk to anybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then he's also the firefighter because he steps forward and creates literally Project Mayhem. He's blowing shit up, right? So all aspects of these roles that we play for ourselves are represented in Tyler.
Okay.
And this is the reality that we as individuals should recognize too, is that we stand. You ever stand in the bathroom and talk to or in the shower? You have your shower moments, and I'm talking about the thinking moments, not whatever else you do. But we have these shower moments where we're like, hey, and we're talking to ourselves. Okay, that's okay. We provide this second, or I guess third person perspective on our own thoughts in order to evaluate ourselves with some objectivity. And these different characters, the firefighter, the exile, and the manager, those are the common roles that we step into as individuals. So the narrator, he manifested Tyler to do all three of them.
That's actually a very good point, and didn't even think about that throughout the entire movie, because at the beginning, when he first meets him, it's the person that's telling him, like there's something intriguing about this guy. Like, I want to start hanging out with him.
Mm-hmm.
Then it quickly turns into like, okay, now we're on somewhat equal level field now, to immediately like the exile, to isolation almost.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good point. I didn't even think about
that power shift that you just described. The narrator first of all is curious about this other aspect of his own personality. I kind of like this guy. That's what I want to be. We're looking at him with affection and desire, but then they become equals. Hey, hit me as hard as you can. Why would I do that? Right? They have this thing in the parking lot, and then he becomes subordinate to Tyler, and he starts doing what Tyler says, and even to the point where Tyler brands him.
Yeah. Well, even subconsciously, because just to get into the weeds of it, where he was blackout and was like, "Wait, what do you mean I was, here 3 weeks ago or whatever?" So yeah, even without him knowing he was being.
Yeah, you got the whole dissociative identity disorder that comes in here. People, that split personality.
Yeah.
But that's the technical term for it, is the dissociative identity. That's where he turns one off and lets the other one take over. Think about this too, that we also have talked about. I don't know if we want to broach a subject on here, but Marla Singer is another possible personality from the narrator.
Oh, how so? What,
she's
what,
the female.
way?
She's the Helen
Bonham Carter. Yeah.
The anima.
Yeah, so
is that right?
She could, from a Jungian sense, she could be that feminine aspect of his character. Think about it, she materializes after he puts his head in Robert Paulson, Bob's bitch tits. So he's reconnecting with this maternal moment, and all of a sudden his feminine aspect manifests. He's
got a very fucked up sense of femininity then, if she's the representation.
I mean, was she I'd have to go back through and watch it from that lens. Was she real, or was she a manifestation, or is that something we just never know? I've seen it a bunch of times. I always thought she was like an actual person.
There's a few things that really indicate that she is a fiction, a figment of his imagination too. She walks through traffic undeterred.
Oh,
she walks through traffic.
Okay.
When he's standing in the pawn shop selling the jeans, the person selling keeps looking at him and never looks at her.
Okay.
So then it's just masculine and feminine side is all that was manifested.
Yeah. And so exactly.
If his masculine side is so jacked up, why couldn't his feminine side be so jacked up too?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
exactly.
it's okay. It fits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we were talking about that earlier before we started recording, and I was against it, but now I'm really starting to see it, because that was the only interaction other than the, what do you call it, the thugs, the minions, whatever. With another human being that she quote unquote has interacted with. So
think about this. He goes when they're doing the meditation. The first time he goes into his cave, he sees a penguin, right? Or for my daughter's sake, a penugan.
What?
Okay, all right.
My daughter used to say it's an ongoing joke. I would.
They're fish, by the way. I have my kids convinced they're fish because they can't fly.
That's right. Yeah.
Continue.
But the second time he goes into the cave, who does he see? He sees Marla, and she's mystical, and she blows the smoke. And so Carl Jung would say, we have the spirit of the time, which is masculinity, and the femininity is the spirit of the depth. And so we have this, and this is from his Red Book, where he really, it's almost like a Gnostic. You as a Gnostic scholar would appreciate the Red Book. But yeah, so think about the narrators. He has two different personalities that emerge from him at different times. Marla appeared first, though.
Did she though?
Oh wait, no, I don't.
I think there was like one of those. What do they call it? The flash. Like.
Oh yeah.
He spliced himself in at some point.
Yep. So the masculine does.
Well, it was the underlinings were already there.
Yeah.
So, but if that theory holds true, she was the first to come to realization. I guess.
To manifest.
Yeah. Okay.
How does he end that character? Because if he ends Tyler Durden, how does he end Marla?
But see, that's the thing. That's the last part of the deal. They're
what
standing
letter is
side
that?
by side.
It's an M.
Yeah.
It's an M for masculinity.
And if we know anything about psychology of shots, there's a reason that they're standing like that.
Yeah. So we have the masculine and feminine standing there. And notice he had no pants, and he's almost got a dress on, just like her.
Whoa.
Wait. Okay. So.
We're gonna have to make sure we blow
we'll
that one up for people
there.
to know what we're looking at.
Yeah. So there's this reconciliation, and he in the end is like he tells her, he's like, you met me at a weird time in my life. So the resolution of this whole internal struggle that he gets with, he reconciles his masculine and feminine.
All right, I'm gonna have to rewatch this movie now with that lens.
But the affliction was. See, and that's.
Did
I'm
I
gonna
just
have
fuck
to
you
chill
guys
on this
up?
because
No,
well,
no,
no, because the affliction ended when he eliminated him with the bullet.
Limited Tyler.
He individuated. He basically said, "I am in charge of my masculinity. You are not.
Right.
I hold the gun."
But she remains. Tyler goes away, which
So now-
leads me to believe that she is real and victim of Tyler as well.
I mean, I would say,
Okay.
I think that's how the movie was
They want you
intended.
to. Mhm. That's the. But yeah, I'm not. Remember, we are talking about symbolism here,
Mhm.
not. There's room for interpretation, 100%.
Okay.
I believe me, I do not prescribe to this is the only way to watch this movie.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's one of those after I've
Well,
watched
like,
it.
has the writers or directors ever provided clarity? I guess I've never looked into it.
Yeah, we can apply a form of hermeneutics to this. I know hermeneutics is for ancient, but you could kind of take that same model. It's a
Sure.
scientific model of what is the implied author trying to, who are they trying to talk to, and who are they as an implied author.
And we have two.
Real quick, for those that don't know what that is, what's the definition of
Hermeneutics is an ancient science. Is a science of studying ancient scripture, ancient literature, ancient text. But if you take it from just what it is, it's just looking at an implied author. Who is the implied? Not the actual author. Who is the author? Who do they think they are when they're writing this movie, and who are they trying to write it for?
And we have two authors. We have Chuck Palahniuk, the author of the book, and Brian Singer? Is that who the director is?
What? Yeah, I
Okay,
think it
so,
was.
So
yeah.
we have. So now this movie does not. It deviates from the book quite a bit in
Okay.
different ways. So I'm speaking specifically of Brian Singer's
movie.
movie
Okay.
adaptation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And who was this movie marketed for?
And
Because
other-
the intended audience didn't end up being, because like you said, it was the frat boys took it over.
Yeah, because Chuck Palahniuk is gay. I don't know if you guys know that, but Chuck Palahniuk, the author of Fight Club, is gay.
That's what I was getting. I felt like there was going to be some undertone of that because this is clearly not written to the frat boy.
Not if they understand irony.
That's
And satire.
Well,
yeah,
that's the
what I
whole
was
point
getting.
of Fight Club, isn't it? It's to make fun of. It's a parody of all these
So-
different.
Contrastive inquiry would have me ask the following. Does his homosexuality have anything to do with the story, or was he just writing an amazing story?
Well, so I'm going to lean on my master's degree in English here too, and look at it from a literary criticism point of view in terms of like we can look at it from. Is it possible for the author to totally divest himself from his identity as he's writing? There's going to be some unconscious, subconscious.
Perhaps,
lines.
but my argument would be Queen,
Hmm.
who wrote amazing love songs,
Right.
rock
Oh,
songs,
yeah.
completely in contrast to what would later be discovered.
Well, I mean, but we have multiple people within this band involved in the creative process. Now, granted, Freddie Mercury, the backbone.
Wow.
I mean,
Yeah.
Amazing.
yeah, Bohemian Rhapsody. When that he did,
Yeah.
he envisioned that whole thing independently. Wow. But when we think about Chuck Palahniuk and his perspective, there's several. He's done. I think his interview with Joe Rogan touched on this a little bit. I don't remember exactly, but I would say we won't necessarily know. We're always going to make this is all an interpretation.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I think understanding, if you think about what at the time that this was written, what was going on in terms of how gay rights and the masculine identity as filtered through homosexuality was changing based on the time that was written. There is definitely, like you said, Cam, that criticism of masculinity in general, of I would say criticism of hyper masculinity, because masculinity in and of itself is not bad, but this hyper masculinity, this, I'll use the air quote, toxic masculinity is what we were describing here. Let's just beat the shit out of each other. Let's, I'm not.
No. It's
Physicality
weird.
isn't
I'm
a bad.
thinking of the movie in different lenses that I've never really thought about thinking about. But it's also interesting too because going back to something we were talking about before, isn't it also possible then that if that's the train of thought we go down, isn't it also possible then that the movie is a manifestation of a desire of what the author wanted to be?
Absolutely.
I would, I would go with that.
You know,
as,
like
as,
that-
as any writer,
But
you,
no,
you implant yourself into what you write.
I would say it is a deconstruction of what the author was conditioned to be. Society says you need to be. So the voices that when Tyler is talking about, hey, we buy things so we impress people we don't like, all that stuff. This idea, like, who do you want to fight? I want to fight Abe Lincoln. He's tall. He's got reach. You know, all of these things. The way that we as men are conditioned to think, right? What?
That's such an obscure reference.
Yeah.
Abe Lincoln, he's
I
got
could
reach.
see
He
it.
said he's
But that's
got
what he
reach.
said, yeah.
Yeah, it just cracked me
He's
up. I was
scrappy.
like,
You need to watch the movie, dude.
Yeah.
like that. What a
It really is a
brilliant
great
quote.
movie.
He's got reach.
It's pretty
Who do you want
good.
to fight?
There's
At
some
one point, he's
zingers
like,
in it.
at
For
one
real.
point, he's like, "Who do you want to fight? I'm going to fight Gandhi." Well, think about what that's saying, though. And the time there's a scene in the basement where Jared Leto's character,
Okay.
he's this great-looking, pretty boy dude. He just demolishes this guy, and at the end, he says, "I just wanted to destroy something beautiful."
I was just thinking that too. Like,
You know?
like there's so many little one-liners,
Mhm.
I guess you could call it, because like it's part of a sentence, whatever. But there's so many things that I pull away from the movie. That was one of my. I've said it before so many times too. When I was like, I wanted to be destructive, or I was in a destructive phase of my life, and I remember I said that one time to a friend of mine who was like, what's going on? I was like, I felt like destroying something beautiful.
Mhm.
I literally, quoted the movie
So-
to describe my life.
So back to Jungian theory here is like we have immature and mature manifestations of these archetypes. The warrior archetype, the immature version is the hero. I want to be perfect. I want to slay the dragon. I want to rescue the princess. I want to be perfect. I want all the stories to be written about me. But it isn't until the hero is burned by the dragon, humbled by life, that you realize that you emerge as a mature, seasoned, tempered warrior. The warrior that is who is untempered is willing to use his sword, the gun, our dick, whatever it is. We destroy things when we are untempered by the lover or the king, right? Or the magician. Our intellect, our heart, or our leadership capacity. When those things aren't in check, the warrior is a destructive force. In our society, this movie really represents that well. Like, when we do not temper this warrior energy in our masculine, from the masculine side, we are destructive.
Yeah. Well, so on that note, real quick, then as men specifically, when we have those tendencies, let's call it urges. I mean, I was just talking to my fiance about this the other day.
Congrats, by the way.
Congrats
you.
again.
Where we have a son together, and he was just like playing with something, like he was just like whacking it, and she was like, why did you just play with it normally? Why don't and I said, you get ready, because if he's
normal
anything
to
like
me.
I was the kid, like I would grab a stick and I would just like
yeah.
beat everything in reach, so we have those urges as men, but how can we turn that into something positive, something?
How do we channel it?
How do we channel it? Thank you. That's a better way.
There's a theme here, and I think, Dave, you're a little bit more well versed on this. This is one of the only times in society where we're kind of like we're in a safe area, right? We live in cubicles in these little houses and apartments. Hasn't really ever been like that. We're in a part where we don't necessarily fight for our lives anymore. We aren't out there scavenging, and so a lot of the stuff that's going on in this movie is new to what is going on with masculinity. So we're talking about getting rid of these urges. Well, these urges kept us alive for thousands of years. So getting rid of what? Putting us into safety. And so I guess before we get into that, let's just apply context to this is a new thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
so
it's
we're
a temporary thing too.
Yeah.
Societies rise and fall. That's just how it is. And so while it may not be necessary now,
Mm-hmm.
it will absolutely be necessary in the future.
Right.
And that's really close to one of your theories. What is it? Is it 60 or 80 years?
Yeah, I mean, it's about 80 years-ish.
And so we get into this safe zone where we're like, let's temper the masculine urges. Well, then where does that lead us?
Right, so if you think about the war cycle, right, it pops up, with mathematic precision. I mean, you're going to need it,
Mm-hmm.
and if society falls, collapses, you're going to need it there. I mean, it's not a bad thing. How it's used can be.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? And it's kind of like what kind of what we were talking about. The idea that if you want any semblance of safety, then you better be a proficient warrior, right? It's the paradox. It doesn't mean you use it. It just means that you have to have it. Kind of what Lance was talking about regarding, the putting children into martial arts.
Yeah, to your point, Cam, is like you've got these young boys. Your son is, and you and I was the same way. You've got this energy. You're going to vent it some way. If you can put that child in a way where they can learn how to apply that violence precisely, controlled, but also then understand that you do that. The greater lesson is, when do you apply that violence? And this is what goes back to the difference between an immature hero and a mature warrior. Is the warrior knows it is his job to apply his violence efficiently and effectively on behalf of something greater than himself. So just what would be known as a transpersonal other.
There's a scene from a TV show, and it was like from the 90s, so I don't remember which one it was, whether it was Home Improvement, Saved by the Bell, or something like, but the point is, like, one of the characters is in high school. And this stuck with me. Like, here I am 35, I saw that maybe when I was like 6, 7, however. So, I mean, it was that impactful to me even then. Was the character was getting bullied by a bully in school and tried fighting, was aggressive, and, got home and, was being a temper tantrum, teenager, because they just got bullied and couldn't do anything about it. And dad took him and put him in karate classes, and of course it's condensed for 20-minute episode, but in a time frame, that kid learned discipline, learned controlled violence, and the next time that bully came up to him and was like trying to instigate a fight with him, in the hallway, he knew right then and there, like, I don't have to fight this guy. Like, I know I can destroy this guy if I really wanted to. So the bully does the whole thing, like, woo, and then laughs as he walks away, but really, who has the power in this dynamic?
And then, I mean, like you said, Dave, the strongest warrior in the valley is the guy who's not going to get messed with. So it is important that we as men recognize that this is an important part of ourselves to develop.
Yeah. Because
if we don't develop it, we're left with, number one, a lack of control, lack of confidence. We don't know what we're capable of. We as Marines, and you've got military background too. So we understand this. I mean, you've also got a bunch of years beating people up in bars too.
Many times to test
Oh,
that
do
theory.
tell.
So, but point being is, we have all been tempered by experience. We've had our nose bloodied, literally and figuratively, by life. And so we have a generation, like you said, this is new. It's not necessarily new. We are just in a stagnant phase of our society where the power of masculinity has been, on one hand, it's been demonized because we've got a bunch of guys, grown men with boy psychology, abusing their power, whether that's physical power over women or disadvantaged people, economic power over of the unfortunate. Point being is, the individuals in power are not regulating that power for greater good.
And you could also think about it too. I mean, statistically speaking, you think about like the domestic violence surrounding sporting events and so on and so forth, right? So they're watching these people who are performing, and they're getting that visceral response from that, and then something goes wrong.
Feeling.
Yeah, and so it taps into something primal into us, right? That competition.
Add alcohol.
And and add in these other things where there are no outlets, and boom, explode, and so if you think about the movie and you think about that explosion of Tyler, the explosion, I mean, you think about it from a personality standpoint, a figurative, literal, whatever, there's explosions throughout the movie of personality, of environment, self, I mean, there's a lot of things, and it's just that
Bottled
pressure boom,
Yeah.
pressure, boom. And we do that, unfortunately, to ourselves unless we have self-awareness and some of these other things where, if we understand the environment we're in, we are less victims of that situation, and we have the discipline and self-awareness and control to navigate it. I think awareness is a huge part of
And it
everything
could be
we
something
do.
as simple as I remember when I was running my brewery, there was a point, I don't remember what it was, but helplessness is how I felt. There was this stuff was going on, bills or might have been an issue with distributor. I don't remember what it was, but point being, I was just like vented up. I was like, and I remember going over, grabbing a pallet off my stack of pallets, pulled a pallet off, went back to the tool bench, grabbed a hammer, went back, and I just beat the hell out of this pallet for myself. I just needed to vent. I knew myself that I need to vent, right? And I feel like I need to be physical. And at the time, that's what I had. I had a meeting to get to. Beat this pallet. My partner, my nephew, sticks his head out of the lab. We had a lab where we did all of our testing and stuff. He sticks his head out. He's like, "You all right?" "Yeah, I'm good." He's like, "You want to talk?" "No, I'm good now." Took the busted up pallet, threw it in scrap, put my hammer away, and I walked off. But I was aware. Had I not done that, I could have gone to the meeting, something happened, triggered, next thing you know, I'm blowing up at somebody.
On the news.
Yeah, let's hope not. But, there's a point where we it's in us. The capacity for violence is in every person.
Yeah.
But I would say, obviously, because of testosterone, conditioning, years of evolution, men have this capacity for violence that when we are not in tune, number one, aware with it, the other thing, conditioned and trained to recognize it, and then also trained to apply it in a constructive way. Yeah, it's a recipe for disaster.
But it could also be a great thing too. I mean, think about respect, right? Respect is born out of that, right? You will respect somebody else if you have an understanding and a healthy respect for violence.
I would tweak that and say we will respect them when we understand their capacity period.
Sure.
Capacity for violence, capacity for intellect, capacity for passion, capacity for wit. We respect people when they demonstrate control of their capacity.
And matched with self-respect, right? So if you have the capacity for violence, you have self-respect, you have, the things that he's talking about, very few people are very few, not to say that none will, but very few are going to try to take advantage of you, try to hurt you, try to rob you, right? Because the way you carry yourself, the way you feel, the way you look around, situational awareness, and so on and so forth, you're less likely to be a victim, right? The people who have no self-awareness, no situational awareness, no capacity to, no knowledge of how to handle themselves in a situation, they're the victims. From a security standpoint, I mean, they're the ones that are taken advantage of. They're targeted. They're targeted. You see what I mean? Like it's a complex situation.
Soft target, hard target. We would do that with ECPs, VCPs, and that kind of stuff. Like, are you going to be a hard
VCP stands for
entry control point, vehicle control point?
listeners.
Entry control point, vehicle control. We would do a lot of that with when you come up to the vehicle control point, the entry control point. Are you a hard target or a soft target? If you're picking your nose, walking around doing nothing, you're a soft target. But if you're alert, if you're at ready, if you look like you know what you're doing, they don't want that spot. They'll pick a soft spot. And so that's what you're saying, right?
So the narrator at the beginning of the movie was a very soft target.
Yeah.
He had become complacent and unaware and stifled, repressed in so many ways.
Yeah. What were you saying earlier? Because I think you hit the nail on the head with it. Like he was repressing his masculinity.
Oh yeah.
Yes. So that.
I mean, you think about it. I mean, he domesticated himself into an apartment full of stuff, and that's typically. I mean, you think about if the four of us were stuck on an island, our stuff would be ragged, our beards would be long, we'd be like whatever. I mean, we would, if there was no sense of competition or peacocking or anything, as far as the fair sex.
Yeah.
I mean, we would be unkept, and we wouldn't care,
Yeah.
right?
He was
Yeah.
he was literally nesting.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
He was.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with nesting. It's an important part of who we are. I remember when I got divorced and I moved in my condo, my own. I took great pride in like, I felt like that. I was like, I'm gonna go to the get this and that. Oh, and
I did the same thing.
I
It's
was
like
making-
I remodeled the house to be like, okay, this is
how
my
I want
identity
it.
now.
yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we also need to know where we are in the cycle and understand that okay, I'm in a growth phase, and part of my growth is is defining what my identity is as defined by me, as represented by these things. But these things don't truly define me. It's just a process that we use in order to help us groom the next version of ourselves.
Well, and you think of your single self. Okay, think about how you
What does
lived.
that look like?
Mm.
Yeah, think about how you lived, right? How
It was hoe phase.
Huh?
It was hoe phase for
It was
me.
hoe Well, but you didn't have the more than likely, statistically speaking, you didn't have the niceties, the trinkets, the things, right?
Tchotchkes.
It was minimalist in a lot of ways. I
Yeah.
mean, I can remember I was 100% okay with my TV being on a box. It wasn't a
on an air
nightstand.
mattress.
It wasn't
Yeah.
exactly right. I mean, I didn't have pictures on the wall. I didn't have that kind of stuff came later when I had more domesticated myself. That stuff was not a priority when I was ready to go out and hang out with the boys.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so when we nest usually as a group. So imagine now the narrator nesting without purpose, without companionship, without friends, with only the job that he was in a very dark place, right? I mean, it becomes empty. It's an empty place full of stuff that really meant nothing.
Deserves to be blown up.
It deserves to get
yeah.
blown up
So
because
no,
it was all empty.
It meant nothing.
So no purpose, no vision, no mission. That's what you.
There we go.
There
That's
it
your
is.
thing, yeah.
There we go. Right. So what are we
Yeah.
doing it for? And that becomes a dangerous thing. And that's one of the things I really loved about that movie was it really exemplified just how dangerous these empty things in our life
Mhm.
can be, and how remorseful and I mean, because when you do something stupid and empty, you know it, and you get to face yourself in the mirror every day when you do it. Like, why did I do it? In fact, if you think about buyer's remorse, and that's probably, I mean, you can probably inform us some of this. I mean, that comes from buying things without a solid sense of purpose.
Yeah.
Right? Like, well, it's nice. Oh, wait, but that was a lot of money. Oh, wait, but there was these other things. Oh my gosh, why did I do that?
Mhm.
Well, if you bought it with purpose, you typically
Don't have buyer's
don't
remorse.
have buyer's remorse. I mean, you know exactly what you did, why you did it, you know what it's for, and it's going to be applied accordingly.
Yeah.
All things with purpose, for purpose, on purpose typically tend to avoid these empty things that we fill our lives with.
So we don't know if the director and author was trying to make that point that if you have no purpose, vision, and mission, a Tyler Durden will enter itself in. We don't know that they're trying to make that point, but that is something that occurs.
Well, I think when we go back to when he's reading about Jack's all the
Emotions.
the emotions.
Great scene.
You know, he's for you who haven't seen it.
Yeah.
He finds all these in this old house they go. They find all these magazines, and he starts reading. Oh my God, this is an entire narrative written from different body parts. I am Jack's wounded spleen and stuff like this.
Yeah.
And so he's talking about how there's a lot of these. Some of the I don't remember exactly which one it was, but a lot of the dialogue that they have while they're in their house is about that purpose. Like
So who's the Jack character? Because I saw a scene that was Jack's revenge where he beats himself up in an office.
Yeah.
What is that?
So Jack is the character in these books that he's reading. Jack is just the name of the
It's like a
The
series of
organ
books for kids.
holder.
It's
What?
like a series of
The
books for
organ
kids.
holder?
the organ holder.
Really?
Yes.
I think so because I mean it's cartoonish, right? You know, so it's literally like a little book that helps kids understand. Imagining their emotions because I mean they're little books like literally like 4 pages long, and each one is just like a page that represents like I am Jack's. You know what do you say?
Broken heart.
Broken heart.
So he's taking parts of this character too.
only in facetiously.
Yeah,
Like he
it's-
literally just like there's. I think a bit of like from a writer's standpoint.
Okay.
In the movie when he says that like I am Jack smirking revenge
Mm-hmm.
of like because he had just read those books
Okay.
and then the next scene is him talking to his boss and he's like I am Jack smirking revenge.
Mhm.
You know, so I don't know that
okay.
necessarily that it was a character.
But
So-
Could be
what
borrowed
comes from that
confidence.
is this. What comes from this is we recognize the lack of vision in the narrator's life when he's having these conversations with Tyler and then reading these books within this abandoned house.
Mhm.
The lack of vision and purpose that he had in life, and even then, Tyler's calling him out on it.
And that's the danger, because when you ever find yourself not having vision,
Falling asleep.
it would create vision. I mean, that's what you've told us. You know, if you
You're
find your
ever
place of
lost,
stagnation,
find vision.
find
Yeah.
vision.
Starting straight from the end of the movie, we're going to wrap it up here. With the scene we're talking about, he takes the gun and effectively, literally kills Tyler, metaphorically, literally. So, what about that scene can we take away as positive for anybody that's struggling with, like, for me, that entity, you know, that Tyler in our life that is causing us to self-destruct?
Mm-hmm. I want your take on this, Chili.
Well, because it's suicide.
Yeah.
Well, is it suicide though? Because it's
don't
control.
think
It's control.
Mhm.
Well, it's
Because-
just like everything we talked about, we got to
But
kill
it
the
is-
past
I was
self.
gonna
but
say
it's-
though, it was unsure. Not like it's
Was it
not
left in
like
the
you're
balance?
gonna know
Yeah.
the outcome of this attempt.
Right.
Yeah, you hit a
True.
tooth, and who knows? I mean,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
fragments go where they want to go with bullets. So,
I think there is definitely a symbolic action behind it, but then there's the physical act that he performed.
yeah.
When,
You know, my view on suicide is actually very similar. Not having full context of the movie, but it is very similar to that. It is the killing of self, and there's a desire to get rid of something. That's a parasite. I use the term, it's a hostage situation. That's why I use it a lot in my methodology with intervention strategy. It's a hostage. It's a hostage negotiation. And that's why it's so successful, because this movie almost embodies it. I am talking to a Tyler Durden and a narrator when I walk in a room. And I probably should watch this movie because it's probably got some parallels that I could probably connect to. But I have somebody in a room that has these traits. It may not be a Tyler Durden. It's their version of whatever they
Shadow
needed to act
self.
out. Yeah, it's the shadow. It's the false self. Whether you want to go with Carl Rogers stuff or anything, it's a different self that is not realized, but they want to realize it or they don't want it. It doesn't matter. It's just this other person that is taking control, and one of them is not walking out of the room.
Mhm.
In all cases, and that's why one of the things I talk about, one of the sayings I say when I walk out, when I'm about to go into a intervention, is we will both walk out of here. That's because I will walk out and they will walk out. There is one person not walking out of there. In all cases, there has to be. The hostage taker cannot walk out, or else it's going to happen again. We're going to end up in the same situation. They'll do it. I've had multiple times. We just talked about this the other day. Multiple times where I was doing well with somebody, and then a couple of days later they would do it, and that's because the hostage taker did not leave the room. The Tyler Durden did not leave the room. They didn't symbolically kill Tyler Durden, and so that's my take on it. Is it has to happen. You have to take control back.
And I think the pinnacle moment in that scene is when he goes, wait a minute. You're not real. I'm in control. In fact, you don't even have the gun.
Right, and then it turns to him having the
and
gun.
he has the gun.
Right.
That gun is the symbol of power
Mm-hmm.
and control. And therefore, when we think about individuation, which is a reconciliation of both the dark and light side of ourselves, we have to. One thing I think what is good that comes out of this is we understand that we have the Tyler Durden in us. The question is, do we control it? Like Dave, you've talked about, we have this beast, this lion or whatever your animal is, this thing that sits beside you,
Hellhound.
this hellhound, whatever it is,
A penguin.
the capacity, a penugan. I got an attack killer penugan beside me, and this thing has the capacity for violence against others and against me.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm in control of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the point. When we have this individuation, we understand that we reconcile the dark and light, the ego and the shadow self, and we see that we as a whole, all of those things are in us. The firefighter, the exile, the manager, those are all parts of ourselves too. And we know, if we're aware of it, we can. It's important that we have a manager in our mind that says, hey, Lance, you got some crazy shit going on. You might need to reach out to Dave and go grab coffee just so you can level set, right? Oh, the manager is looking out for me so that my good self can come forward. So in that scene, when he recognizes he has control, he knows that Tyler's still there. I would even say he knows that Marla is part of it too, because he wants Marla in his life. Before all this goes down, he calls her and he reconciles with her. He says, I want to let you know that crazy stuff's going on in my life, and but I want you in my life. He needs the feminine in his life in order to balance. And once he recognizes that he needs that feminine in his life, then he can then control Tyler.
So I look at it from a perspective, I mean, of course, of either a cognitive behavior or a leadership perspective here. And what I found interesting was the declaration, the self-declaration to reclaim personal leadership.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, because it is, you have to decide. We dig into leader-follower theory, you know, it's a symbiotic relationship, but oftentimes it's a choice, right? You can choose to lead your life, or you can choose to live a life of followership in somebody else's guidance, right? You can choose to be a leader, but it is a serious decision because the responsibility is yours, right? And in this situation, he finds himself, you know, you guys were referencing, oh, and you're not even holding it. Well, I am, though. This is my life. This is my responsibility. And yes, I will deal with the aftermath that is about to ensue. I can't do that, but I can do this. Right? And he took personal agency in that moment, made the decision to let go and control, let go of the nonsense and control the chaos. Right? In the midst of total chaos, it was that shred of self-control and personal leadership that led him out of this darkness. And I thought it was fascinating, you know, and I see that, yeah, it's dressed up, but really kind of what we're looking at there is just this seizure of personal leadership. And he did it, and it was at all costs. It doesn't matter. He needed to do it. He needed to do what he felt he needed to do. He did the right thing in the moment where everything was out of control, and it brought order. I thought it was just fantastic. It's a brilliant example of what can be done in the world of chaos, where we step up and do the right thing. We put our oxygen mask on first, and he finally did it in that moment.
Yeah.
As violent as it was, but then immediately, and this is you know, again, kind of looking at the aftermath. He did it. It was painful. It was scary. It was all these things, but he did it. And immediately, in the midst of all the chaos, you found a sense of order. And, you know, he holds the hand of Marla, who's her own chaotic mess. And he's a chaotic mess, bleeding from the back of his head. And he's like, yeah, all right, here we go.
You met me at a strange time in
Yeah.
my life.
This is the new phase. You know, here we're gonna bring order to this. It's gonna get better.
But I don't know if this is so much writing, acting, directing, a combination of all the above. But that specific moment is, so you said balance. Like, it's the way the look on his face when he looked at Marla at the end there. Like, you know, towers falling down. You know, world's going to shit. And you could just tell by the look on his face when he was looking at her, like, there's peace. There's peace that was not there for the rest of the movie.
Awareness.
Oh,
That's real simple. So I had my own little crisis this week. You know, we met on Monday. I was having this existential crisis about how, like, suicide intervention was upsetting the balance of the universe, and I was somebody playing God, and, like, you know,
Okay.
it was this whole, like, no good deed goes unpunished. So when I go in and I do these things, I'm upsetting the balance, and I shouldn't be. Like, it was the whole thing I was going
So
through.
the whole Final Destination thing.
Oh, it was. So I sat with Dave and I was like, "You got to walk me through this for a moment, man." And we talked about autonomy, and we talked about and you said agencies. You know, the autonomy. I was like, am I intercepting somebody's autonomy of choice? You know, their choice to do this. Am I stepping in the middle of it when they have made a choice to do something? And he walked me through how no, they are actually. And this is a very good picture of this. This guy has lost his autonomy. Tyler Durden is making the choices for him. Is this correct?
Yeah.
So he has lost his autonomy. And that act, taking control back, is regaining his autonomy. That's the balance. That's the peace. He is finding it again. And that's what we see in the suicide. And in all we see the absence of autonomy. And so that's what helped me walk through this week when you walked me through. I said, no, you are giving people a picture of what autonomy looks like. They have lost it. And so when I see this movie now, and you just said that, I was like, yes, that is what is happening. He shoots himself, which obviously we don't recommend that, but he regained autonomy.
Yeah.
So
The
It
symbolism of it.
It killed the entity that had robbed him of autonomy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I mean, I have my father committed suicide when
Mhm.
I was like 93 or 94. I was in the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
And I have some other loved ones in my family who also their father committed suicide
Mhm.
too. And so we've got a very interesting perspective on suicide. Of like, my father was a tortured soul,
Yeah.
and there was a point where this was a great relief for him, even though it caused all this
Mhm.
trauma within the family and all this stuff. It's like, and this other people in my life who have experienced this, we talk about this in the sense that there's a time when, like, terminal ill people who are terminally ill,
Mm.
the quality of life is such that they don't want to live anymore. They're conscious of this choice. I would say that some of these victims, I would call them victims,
Mhm.
because they are the things that are happening, the trauma they've experienced. They do not have the tools in order to deal with that rationally. So therefore, they're making irrational choices. They're creating or implementing a very permanent solution to a temporary problem with the suicide.
Yeah.
However, someone who's terminally ill, who knows they're quite rational about what's going on, they're choosing, I don't want to suffer anymore. That is suicide in and of itself. But what the difference there is, are they aware of things? And again, it goes back to what you said, and this supports that idea of the autonomy. Depression, guilt, these things are stealing these people of their perspective, their ability to see things with clarity. However, somebody who's terminally ill, they have clear perspective on it, yet they're in a position where they make that choice.
Well, that is the question, right? Perception versus perspective.
Yes.
And so it is.
That's a great example of that.
It is.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so that's why when you said a permanent solution to a temporary problem, right? Perspective. Unfortunately, they have perception, right? This is everything. I don't have a choice,
Mhm.
right? I don't have a choice is sort of a belief,
Yeah.
not a reality, right? And so we have to be careful. And I think, ultimately, how we talk to ourselves, the things we do, the emptiness of the things that we adopt, and so on and so forth. Um, that's why we have to be careful. Not only how we talk to ourselves, but how we operate in our lives, how we talk to others, how the things we adopt, the things we not only just in our lives, but in our identity and so on and so forth. I mean, it's powerful stuff. We have to be very careful. And the more careful we are, the more we can tear it apart, the more self-aware we become, the more true control we have over, I guess, really how we navigate the world. So
Think about, had he known where he was in this cycle, you know, he would have been then, perhaps if he'd have been aware of it, he would have been more mindful and recognized what Tyler was earlier on. Now, granted, if he's got biochemical stuff going on and he's got real dissociative identity disorder, well, that's got a whole different can of worms there. But awareness.
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, I want to wrap up this week's episode with that. That's a good stopping point, I think. Guys, thank you so much for the conversations. Thanks so much for the free therapy today.
Yeah.
I want to shout out to Gavin, our behind the scenes producer over there. He's kicking ass. Thank you.
Good job.
I'm excited. I'm excited for the next one. I think it's going to be a good one. It's going to be our first guest appearing episode.
We have a guest.
We have
Somebody
a guest.
likes us.
I don't know.
We have friends.
Are we paying her? Did we discover that actually?
She's an amazing woman.
Yep. Her name is Susanna Matthews. She's known as the Date Maven.
Oh.
We will be reviewing Wonder Woman and the roles of femininity in society. So it's a perfect segue to go from Fight Club to now talk about Wonder Woman and having Susanna on board with us to go through that.
It's interesting that we bring up Wonder Woman because I've actually kind of helped her coach some of her male clients, and she specifically has mentioned to her female clients the use of the bracers to block things. So she when I told her that we were going to be doing Wonder Woman, she was really excited about that. She connects with the character already.
Awesome. All right. Well, guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.